The blood ran warm down his forearm, pooling at the crook of his elbow before dripping onto the worn planks of the porch. Silas Ashford stood in the doorway of his cabin, a shotgun still smoking in his hands, and watched the darkness swallow the silhouettes of 3 riders retreating across the flatland. Behind him, the woman he had found 3 days ago pressed herself against the far wall of the cabin. She was shaking, but she was standing. That mattered. The night was still, except for the distant thunder of hooves fading into nothing. Somewhere far off, a coyote called out to the empty sky, and another answered from deeper in the hills. Elena Whitmore stepped forward. Her voice came out raw, stripped of everything but the truth. "He will come back." Silas did not turn around. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon where the dust was settling. "I know." "And next time," she said, "he will not come alone." Silas lowered the shotgun, slowly feeling the ache in his shoulder where the recoil had bitten deep. He finally turned to look at her. In the low lamplight, her face was pale but steady. 3 days ago she could not have met his eyes. Now she held his gaze without flinching. "No," he said quietly. "He will not." He walked to the table and set the shotgun down. The wound on his arm was shallow, just a splinter from where the return fire had struck the porch post. He had been lucky. They both had. But luck was a borrowed thing in this country, and borrowed things always came due. "How did we get here?" Elena whispered. Silas looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the window and stared out at the land that had been his home for 12 years. The land that had taken everything from him once. The land that now seemed determined to take what little he had rebuilt. 3 days ago, he said, that is where it started. And so it had. 3 days earlier, the morning had risen like any other summer day over the Arizona Territory. The year was 1887, and the sun came up angry and stayed that way, baking the ground until the dust itself seemed to shimmer and dance in waves of heat that could fool a man into seeing water where there was none. Silas Ashford had been riding back from the eastern pasture where one of his watering troughs had sprung a leak. He was 54 years old, with a body hardened like old oak and hands calloused from decades of working cattle and mending fences. His face had learned not to show emotion in the worst moments, not because he felt nothing but because life had already taken enough from him and showing pain only invited more. People in Red Hollow said that Silas kept his expression blank because the years had carved everything soft out of him. They were half right. The truth was simpler and sadder. He had learned that tears did not bring back the dead, and rage did not fill an empty house. He was thinking about the trough, about whether the patch would hold through the summer heat when he first saw the marks in the dirt. Not hoof prints, not wagon tracks. Something else. Drag marks. And beside them, the faint impression of bare feet, staggering and uneven. He followed the trail with his eyes until he saw her. She was maybe a quarter-mile ahead, crawling more than walking, her body wrapped in a thin shawl that had once been white, but was now the color of dried blood and desert sand. Her feet were bare, torn up from rocks and thorns, leaving small, dark smears on the pale dirt behind her. She was not moving like a traveler, not moving like a drunk or a thief or anyone with somewhere to go. She was moving like prey. Silas had seen that movement before, in the war, in the hard years after. In the eyes of women who had learned that every hand reaching toward them was a hand that would hurt. He dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and visible. His boots crunched on the dry earth as he approached each step, measured and careful. The woman's head came up at the sound, and her eyes locked onto his with a fear so sharp it looked almost like rage. She was young, maybe 24, 25 years old at most. Dark hair matted with sweat and dust, high cheekbones that spoke of Apache blood somewhere in her lineage, a heritage that in this territory could earn her suspicion or sympathy depending on who was looking. And on her arms, on her neck, on the parts of her legs visible beneath the torn shawl there were bruises, dark ones, fresh ones, the kind that came from hands that grabbed and held and would not let go. Silas stopped 10 feet away. He held up both hands so she could see them clearly, palms out, fingers spread. "Easy," he said, his voice low and calm, the way he would speak to a spooked horse. "Easy now, miss." The word seemed to hurt her. She flinched when she heard it pulling the shawl tighter around herself as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling apart entirely. Her breathing came in short, broken gasps, not the breathing of someone who was tired, but the breathing of someone who was escaping hands that would not stop. Silas did not move closer. He waited. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. "Can you hear me? I am not going to hurt you." Her throat worked, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted from his face to his hands to the road behind her, always returning to the road, always watching for something that might emerge from the shimmering heat. He took one more step, just one. Slow, careful, measuring every inch. When he was close enough to reach down and help her up, he extended his hand toward her elbow. It was instinct. It was what any decent man would do when someone was hurt and struggling. The moment his fingers touched her skin, she reacted as if he had pressed a branding iron against her flesh. "Don't touch that." The words came out broken, hoarse, desperate. Not rude, not dramatic, not the complaint of someone being difficult. Just pure animal warning pulled up from somewhere deep inside where language barely reached. It was the sound of a creature that had been hurt so many times that even kindness felt like a threat. Silas withdrew his hand immediately. He stepped back and lowered himself into a crouch, making himself smaller, less threatening. He understood now. He understood in a way that made something cold and hard settle into his chest. "All right," he said quietly. "I will not do that." She was gasping now, her eyes bright with something that was not quite tears, her left arm trembling as she tried to hold herself up from the dirt. And that was when Silas saw it. A dark stain spreading beneath the edge of her shawl like a secret that did not want to be found. Blood, maybe. Or something worse. He set his jaw. He did not look too long. He did not ask. He did not give her another reason to panic. He had seen enough wounded creatures, animal and human alike, to know that questions could wait. What could not wait was getting her somewhere safe. Instead of pressing, he leaned back on his heels and spoke like a man making a simple offer, nothing more. "I can get you water. I can take you to shade. I can take you somewhere safe." He paused, letting the words settle. "I am not good with pretty words, but I do not leave people lying in the road." Her eyes flickered with distrust, deep ingrained distrust that had been earned through pain. Silas nodded once as if he understood, because he did. "You do not have to trust me," he said, "but you do need to survive the next hour." She looked at her bare feet torn and bleeding, then at the road behind her, stretching back toward whatever hell she had escaped, then at the fence line in the distance as if she expected someone to emerge from the tall grass at any moment, riding hard and angry. Silas followed her gaze. Nothing moved except the heat waves and a hawk circling high overhead. But he knew what that kind of fear meant. Whoever she was running from was not far behind. He stood slowly and walked to his horse. He retrieved the canteen from the saddlebag, making sure she could see every movement he made. Then he set it on the ground at a safe distance and stepped back, giving her space. "You can take it. I will not come closer." The woman stared at the canteen as if it were a trap, as if the water inside might be poison, or the offer might come with strings attached. Every kindness in her recent memory had probably come with a price. Then thirst won. It always did eventually. She crawled forward, grabbed the canteen, and drank so fast she choked. She coughed water running down her chin, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and clutched the shawl again as if she had forgotten how to hold anything else, as if that thin piece of fabric was the only thing standing between her and complete dissolution. Silas watched the road while she drank. He had been in this territory long enough to know that places like this attracted certain kinds of men. Men who saw a frightened woman as something to be owned, something to be used, something that had no voice and no rights and no one to protect her. He was not that kind of man. He never had been. He crouched again farther back this time and spoke carefully. "What is your name?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the canteen, as if speaking her name aloud might summon whoever she was running from, as if the syllables themselves had power. "Elena," she whispered finally. "Elena Whitmore." Silas nodded. "Elena." He gestured toward his horse, a steady bay mare that had carried him through 12 years of hard work and harder times. "I can take you somewhere safe, but I will do it your way. I will keep my hands where you want them. You tell me what hurts." Elena's lips parted. For a moment it looked like she might cry. The kindness seemed to hurt her more than cruelty would have, but she did not cry. She only nodded once, rigid, terrified, but making a choice to trust this stranger because she had no other options left. Silas moved with silent respect. He turned his body to the side, gave her space, and let her stand on her own, even though watching her struggle nearly broke something inside him. When she stumbled, her legs weak from exhaustion and pain, he did not grab her waist or pull her up. He simply offered his forearm held steady in the air between them. She took it. Her fingers squeezed so tight he could feel her knuckles pressing against bone. She was holding on to the last solid thing left in her world. He helped her into the saddle with movements that were slow and deliberate. His touch was light, precise, only where it was absolutely necessary. Elena held back a sound as she settled onto the horse, and her face went white. Silas saw the pain hit her like a wave, saw her jaw clench against the cry that wanted to escape. He did not comment. He did not ask. He simply climbed up behind her, leaving a careful distance between their bodies, and held the reins open at his sides so that she was not enclosed, not trapped. Then he turned the horse away from the main road and headed toward his ranch, which sat hidden below the horizon, humble and quiet and far from prying eyes. Elena stared straight ahead as they rode. Her teeth were clenched, her gaze lost somewhere in the middle distance, as if her mind was still trapped in another place. A place she could not even bring herself to name. Silas spoke in a low voice like someone who did not want to startle a wounded animal. "My place is a few miles from here. You will have shade, you will have clean water, and you will have a door that locks." When she heard the word locks, her breath changed. It caught for a second, stuttered in her chest, then flowed out as if she had been holding it for days. As if the idea of a door that could keep someone out was something she had forgotten existed. The ride was long, or felt that way. The sun climbed higher, and the heat pressed down on them like a weight. Elena did not speak. She barely moved. But every few minutes her head would turn slightly, her eyes scanning the horizon behind them, watching for pursuit. When the ranch finally appeared in the distance, a modest spread of weathered buildings against the brown and gold of the desert, her shoulders tensed again. "If they come for me," she murmured without turning her head. Silas answered without hesitation. "Then they find me first." The ranch was not much to look at, and Silas had never pretended otherwise. A one-story cabin built of weathered wood and necessity, a small barn that housed 3 horses and a stubborn mule, a corral with a fence that needed mending in 2 places, a water pump that squeaked when you worked the handle, 12 years of work represented in boards and nails and sweat. He guided the horse around the back of the property, keeping them away from the road and any curious eyes that might be watching. When they reached the cabin, he dismounted first and then helped Elena down, careful not to touch the places she was protecting so fiercely. He walked beside her to the door, close enough to catch her if she fell, but not so close as to crowd her. Inside, the air was cooler. It smelled of dried leather ground coffee and the pine soap Silas had used that morning. Simple smells, honest smells, the smells of a life lived alone, but not without dignity. He left a folded shirt on the chair beside the bedroom doorway. It was a work shirt, plain and wide, freshly washed, big enough to cover her completely to hide whatever wounds she was carrying beneath that ruined shawl. He turned to face the wall, not her. "Put that on," he said. "I will be on the porch." Elena stood frozen for several seconds, trembling slightly, her eyes moving from the shirt to the door to Silas's back. She looked at the shirt as if it were some mixture of miracle and punishment, as if she could not quite believe that someone was offering her something without expecting anything in return. Then she went inside slowly and closed the door with hands that still shook. Silas stepped out onto the porch and scanned the horizon with eyes narrowed against the bright afternoon light. Something about that road felt wrong. Something about Elena's fear felt rehearsed, like a performance she had been forced to give many times before. As if this was not the first time she had run, not the first time she had been caught, not the first time she had been hurt. And it pained him more than he would have admitted to anyone to know that someone had done so much damage to her that a simple touch made her jump as if she had heard a gunshot. He heard the soft creak of wood behind him. Elena emerged from the room wearing the borrowed shirt. The sleeves hung past her wrists, the collar sat loose around her neck, the fabric covered her completely. And for the first time since he had found her on that road, she did not look like a ghost. She looked like a real person. Silas turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. "Elena," he said, "tell me one thing. Who are you running from?" Her lips opened, then closed, as if the name had the power to bring him back, as if speaking it aloud would summon him from the dust and heat like a demon called from hell. Her fingers gripped the edge of the shirt as if that cloth were her anchor to reality. Her voice came out broken, small, barely louder than a breath. "My sister's husband." Silas's face did not change. He had learned long ago to keep his reactions buried deep where they could not be used against him. But inside something hardened, something cold and sharp like a knife being drawn from a sheath. "Your sister's husband," he repeated. Elena nodded, and then the words came faster, tumbling out as if a dam had broken. "His name is Marcus Crane. He married my sister Ruth 3 years ago. At first everything seemed perfect. He was charming, wealthy, respected in town. Everyone thought Ruth was lucky." She paused, her breath catching. "Then he started controlling her. What she wore, who she talked to, where she went. She was not allowed to leave the house without permission. She was not allowed to have friends he had not approved. And then—" She stopped. Her hands were shaking. "Then I came to live with them, 6 months ago. My mother's people, the Apache community I had been living with, they were relocated by the government. I had nowhere else to go. Ruth offered me a home." Elena looked up at Silas, and her eyes were haunted. "Marcus started looking at me differently. At first it was just words, comments about my appearance, about my heritage, about how I should be grateful for his hospitality." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then it was not just words anymore." Silas felt his hands clench at his sides. He forced them to relax finger by finger. "Did you tell your sister?" Elena nodded, her face twisting with something between grief and bitterness. "I told her everything. Every touch. Every threat. Every time he came to my room at night when she was asleep. And she looked at me like I was the problem, like I was trying to destroy her marriage. She said I must have misunderstood, that Marcus was a good man, that I should be grateful he still let me stay under his roof." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with betrayal. Silas let out a slow breath. He had seen this before. The way victims were blamed for their own suffering. The way families closed ranks around the abuser and cast out the one who dared to speak the truth. "When did you run?" he asked. 2 days ago. He went to town on business. I grabbed the first thing I could find and ran. I did not even take my shoes." She looked down at her feet, still bare, still torn. "He chased me. I could hear his horse behind me for miles. But then the trail forked and I went one way and he went another. I thought I had lost him." She looked up at Silas and fear flickered in her eyes. "But he will find me. He always finds me. And when he does—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Silas walked to the edge of the porch and looked out at the road. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. "He is going to say that I am the criminal," Elena said quietly. "He is going to tell everyone that I stole from him, that I am a liar, that I am crazy, and people will believe him because he is Marcus Crane, and I am nobody." Silas turned to look at her. "Marcus Crane," he repeated. "I know that name." Elena's eyes widened. "You do. He runs a trading post in Red Hollow, deals in horses mostly. Has his hand in cattle and land too, from what I hear." Silas paused. drinks with the sheriff every Saturday night, sits in the front pew at church every Sunday morning. Elena nodded miserably. He is untouchable. Everyone respects him. Everyone trusts him. Not everyone, Silas said. She looked at him with something like hope, fragile and afraid to exist. There is something else, she said. Something he is hiding. Silas raised an eyebrow. He has a ledger, a book he keeps locked in his office. He told Ruth it was church accounts, donations, and expenses and such. But I heard him talking about it once late at night, and the things he said did not sound like church business. What kind of things? Names I did not recognize, numbers that were too large, dates that seemed to correspond to shipments of horses that came through town. She shook her head. I do not know what it means. But he guards that book like his life depends on it. He hides it under a loose board in his office floor, and every night he checks to make sure it is still there. Silas absorbed this information in silence. A man with secrets was a dangerous man, but a man with secrets and power was far worse. Does anyone else know about this ledger? I do not think so, not even Ruth. Silas nodded slowly. All right, for now you stay here. Tonight you sleep in the bedroom. Lock the door from inside. I will be on the porch. Elena shook her head quickly. I do not want you to get hurt because of me. Silas allowed a small, grim smile to cross his face. That will not be your fault. The night came slowly, the way summer nights did in the desert. The heat lingered long after the sun went down, and the stars emerged one by one until the sky was crowded with them. Silas sat on the porch in a chair worn smooth by years of use, his shotgun across his lap, his eyes never leaving the road. He had lit only one lamp inside the cabin. Too much light at night turned a house into an easy target. Behind him he could hear Elena moving inside. Small sounds, restless sounds, the sounds of someone who had forgotten what it felt like to be safe. He understood those sounds. He had made them himself in the years after Margaret and Lily died, in the years when every creak of the floorboard sounded like footsteps and every shadow looked like a man with a gun. Around 10 o'clock, Elena came to the door. You should sleep, she said. Silas did not turn around. I will sleep when this is over. When will that be? He had no answer for her, so he said nothing. Elena stood in the doorway for a long moment, her silhouette framed by the dim lamplight inside. Then she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you doing this? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. Silas was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something he rarely let anyone see. 12 years ago, he said, I had a wife and a daughter. Elena went very still. One night while I was away selling cattle, a group of raiders came to our ranch. They took everything. They killed everyone. His voice did not break. It was too far past breaking for that. I spent 2 years hunting them, found 3 of the 5. The other 2 disappeared, and I learned something in those 2 years. He turned to look at Elena. Justice does not always come complete. Sometimes the guilty escape. Sometimes the innocent suffer. But that does not mean we stop trying. It does not mean we look away when someone needs help. Elena's eyes were wet, but she did not look away. I made a promise to myself after I buried them, Silas continued. I promised that I would never be the man who stands by and watches. Never again. Elena stepped out onto the porch and stood beside him close enough that he could feel her presence, but not so close as to intrude. Thank you, she whispered. Silas nodded once. It was not something that needed more words. They stood there together in the darkness, watching the road, waiting for what was coming. It came at midnight. Silas heard them before he saw them. The soft crunch of hooves on packed earth moving slowly, trying to be quiet. The low murmur of voices, the creak of leather as men shifted in their saddles. He did not move from his chair. He simply raised the shotgun to his shoulder and waited. 3 shapes emerged from the darkness. They stopped at the edge of the property where the lamplight barely reached. The man in front was dressed well even at this hour. A pressed shirt, clean boots, hair slicked back. He sat on his horse with the easy confidence of a man who was used to getting what he wanted. Marcus Crane. He was handsome in a way that made people trust him. Square jaw, blue eyes, a smile that could charm the boots off a preacher. He was maybe 38 years old, young enough to be vigorous, old enough to have accumulated power. Two men flanked him, hired hands by the look of them. One was thin and wiry, with a smile that showed too many teeth. The other was large and silent, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. Marcus raised one hand in greeting as if this were a social call. "Silas Ashford," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "We have not met, but I have heard of you. The rancher who keeps to himself. The man with no wife, no children, no ties to the community." Silas did not lower the shotgun. "What do you want, Crane?" Marcus's smile widened. "Direct. I appreciate that. What I want is simple. I want my property returned to me. There is no property here that belongs to you." "Ah, but there is." Marcus gestured toward the cabin. "My wife's sister, Elena. She is confused, you see, troubled. She ran away from home and took some things that did not belong to her. I only want to help her." "She does not want your help." Marcus tilted his head as if considering this new information. "And you know what she wants, do you? After knowing her for what, a few hours?" "Long enough." The smile faded from Marcus's face, replaced by something colder. "Let me be clear, Ashford. Elena is family. She belongs with us. Whatever stories she has told you, whatever lies she has spun, they are the fantasies of a disturbed mind. Ask anyone in Red Hollow. Ask the sheriff. Ask the priest. They will all tell you the same thing. Marcus Crane is a good man, and Elena Whitmore is a troubled young woman who needs help." Silas stood slowly, the shotgun still raised and steady. "Get off my land." Marcus did not move. His eyes narrowed. "You are making a mistake, Ashford. A serious mistake. I have friends in this territory, important friends. One word from me and your life becomes very difficult." "I have heard threats before, from better men than you." A flash of anger crossed Marcus's face, quickly controlled. "Very well. If that is how you want to play this." He gathered his reins. "But know this. Elena took something from me. Something important. And I will get it back. One way or another." He turned his horse and began to ride away. Then he stopped and looked back over his shoulder. "If that girl sets foot in a courtroom with her stories, I will make sure she never walks out again." The words hung in the air, heavy with menace. Then Marcus rode into the darkness, his men following. Silas stayed on the porch until he could no longer hear the hoofbeats. Then he stayed longer, watching the darkness, waiting for the return he knew would come. Behind him the door opened. Elena stood there, her face pale in the lamplight. "I heard," she said. "I heard everything." Silas lowered the shotgun and turned to face her. "He is not going to give up," she whispered. "He never gives up." "I know." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the warm night. Silas looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked out at the road where Marcus Crane had disappeared. The moon was rising, casting long shadows across the land. "Tomorrow," he said, "we go to town. We find the sheriff before Marcus does. We tell our side of the story. And if no one believes us—" Silas picked up the shotgun and carried it inside. He set it on the table within easy reach. "Then we find another way." Elena followed him inside and closed the door. The lock clicked into place, a small sound in the quiet night. "There is something else," she said. "Something I did not tell you." Silas turned to look at her. "Marcus said I took something. He was not entirely wrong." She reached inside the borrowed shirt and pulled out a small piece of paper, crumpled and worn. She had been carrying it against her skin, hidden away where no one would think to look. "When I ran, I grabbed my shawl without thinking. This was folded inside it. I did not even know I had it until I changed into your shirt." She held out the paper. Silas took it carefully and unfolded it. It was a fragment torn from something larger. There were numbers written in neat columns, names abbreviated to initials, dates going back several months, and at the bottom in different handwriting, 2 letters, SW. "Samuel Whitfield," Silas said quietly. Elena looked at him sharply. "You know that name?" "He was a horse trader out of Tucson. Made his money moving livestock across the territory." Silas paused. "He died about a year ago. Accident, they said. Thrown from his horse." "You do not believe it was an accident?" It was not a question. Silas studied the paper again, the numbers, the dates, the careful abbreviations. This was a page from a ledger, a record of transactions that someone wanted kept secret. "Marcus Crane deals in horses," he said slowly. "Samuel Whitfield dealt in horses, and now Whitfield is dead, and Marcus has a secret ledger he guards with his life." Elena's face had gone very pale. "You think Marcus killed him?" "I think this paper is worth a lot more than Marcus wants anyone to know." Silas folded it carefully and handed it back to her. "Keep this hidden. Do not tell anyone you have it. Not yet." Elena tucked the paper back against her skin. "What does this mean?" she asked. Silas walked to the window and looked out at the darkness. "It means Marcus Crane is not just a man who hurts women," he said. "It means he is something much worse. And it means he will do anything to keep his secrets buried." He turned to face Elena. "It also means we have something he wants, something he is afraid of." "The paper, the truth." Elena stood very still, her eyes fixed on his face. "He will kill us for this," she whispered. "Both of us." Silas nodded slowly. "He will try." Outside, the night pressed against the windows like a living thing. Somewhere in the darkness, Marcus Crane was planning his next move. And Silas knew with the certainty of a man who had survived too many battles that the next move would come soon. But for now, in this moment, they were still standing. And that was something. The morning came hot and heavy the way summer mornings always did in Red Hollow. The sun had barely cleared the horizon before the air started to shimmer and dance, turning the distant mountains into wavering illusions that seemed to retreat with every step toward them. Silas was awake before dawn. He had not slept more than an hour, and even that had been a soldier's sleep light and troubled, filled with the sounds of hoofbeats that never quite arrived. Elena sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The borrowed shirt hung loose on her thin frame, but she had rolled up the sleeves now, and her hair was clean, pulled back from her face. Her eyes were still watchful, still afraid, but there was something else in them today. Something that looked almost like determination. Neither of them pretended that everything was fine. They both knew the calm was nothing more than the breath before the storm. "Today they will start talking," Silas said, his voice firm and steady. "Men like Marcus Crane never wait. His way of moving is fast, but his strategy is patient. He knows who to talk to. He knows what tone to use." Elena nodded slowly, not lifting her gaze from the cold coffee. "I know how he works. He tells his version before anyone asks for the truth." Silas put on his hat and looked toward the road. "If he is as smart as I think, he will not come alone. And if he has money to spare, he will bring men to do his dirty work for him." He paused briefly. "A lie in this town travels faster than a horse." Elena raised her eyes. "And if he comes with anger, he will bring company." "That is right," Silas replied. He approached the table and placed a plate of bread in front of her, pushing it gently toward her. "Eat. You will not think clearly on an empty stomach." Elena forced herself to take a bite. She chewed slowly, her gaze fixed on the window that looked out onto the road that led to Red Hollow. "I never thought running would be the easy part," she said with a sigh. Silas let out a dry laugh. "Running is almost always the easy part. The hard part is when you decide to stop." They arrived in Red Hollow after midday. Silas took the side alley, the one where the dust swirled in small cyclones, and fewer eyes watched. Elena rode close beside him, her head low, the borrowed hat covering her face. Even so, it was not long before the gazes found them. A man outside the feed store squinted at them as they passed. Another left a conversation unfinished in front of the saloon, turning to watch them with undisguised curiosity. By the time they reached the square, the looks had changed completely. An old cowboy gave Silas a slight nod, the kind of acknowledgment passed between men who remembered those who paid fair prices and kept their word. But most did not nod. Most leaned toward Marcus Crane because Marcus knew how to appear clean, and clean men were easier to believe. Elena noticed it first. That shift in the air. That moment when people decided who you were without asking a single question. "They already know," she whispered. Silas nodded without looking at her. "Or they think they know." They had not taken 10 more steps when a familiar voice shattered the silence. "There she is." Marcus Crane emerged from behind the hitching post. His shirt was pressed and pristine despite the heat. His smile came easy and practiced. One hand rested casually on his belt, a gesture that suggested confidence rather than threat. 2 men stood behind him. One smiled too much, showing teeth that seemed too eager. The other watched too carefully, his eyes tracking every movement like a predator assessing prey. Elena froze. The air seemed to leave her lungs all at once. Marcus spread his arms wide like a Sunday preacher welcoming his congregation back to the fold. "Elena, you have made so many people worry about you." Silas stepped half a pace forward, putting himself between Marcus and the woman behind him. "She is not going anywhere." Marcus let his gaze travel over Silas from head to toe, slow and calculating the way a man might examine livestock at auction. "Well now, I did not realize you had taken up keeping company these days, Ashford." Several neighbors drifted closer, not close enough to interfere, but close enough to hear without appearing to be eavesdropping. Their faces held that particular expression common to small towns everywhere, a mixture of curiosity and judgment, barely concealed behind masks of neutrality. Marcus shook his head slowly, wearing the expression of a disappointed father forced to discipline an unruly child. "She took things when she ran, important things, and I suspect you helped her do it." That was enough. A murmur slithered through the gathering crowd. Someone whispered the word thief, and it spread like smoke through dry grass. Elena's fists clenched at her sides. "I did not steal anything." Marcus released a theatrical sigh, his face arranged in an expression of patient suffering. "That is not how it looks, I am afraid." Silas felt the tension tightening like wire stretched to its breaking point. He leaned forward just enough for Marcus to hear him clearly. "You are lying." Marcus smiled wider, showing teeth that gleamed in the harsh sunlight. "Then prove it." Silas recognized the trap immediately and refused to step into it. A man had to know when to speak and when to move. So instead of arguing, he turned and addressed the people gathered around them. "Ask her why she ran," he said, his voice carrying across the square. "Ask her why she left barefoot in the middle of the night." Marcus laughed, a hollow sound that held no real humor. "Do not listen to him. He is confused. He does not know what he is talking about." One of the men behind Marcus stepped forward, his chest puffed out with borrowed authority. "This rancher has always been trouble, always sticking his nose where it does not belong, always thinking he knows better than decent folk." The words scattered through the crowd like gunpowder waiting for a spark. Trouble. The accusation hung in the air, poisoning the atmosphere. And Elena understood that in this moment, truth did not matter. What mattered was noise, and Marcus Crane was very good at making noise. Silas understood it too. The moment was slipping away from them like water through cupped hands. He leaned toward Elena. "The courthouse," he whispered. "Now." They turned to leave, and that was when it happened. A hard shove from behind sent Silas stumbling into a stack of crates. He grunted in pain, caught himself against the rough wood, and turned around. Anger flashed in his eyes for the first time since this had all begun. But he did not strike back. He did not lunge forward or reach for a weapon. He simply raised one arm, pointing directly at the man who had pushed him, and spoke with a calm that was more threatening than any shout. "Touch me again, and you will answer to the law, not to the mob." Marcus raised both hands, his false smile firmly in place. Now, there is no need for things to go that far, is there?" But his eyes told a different story. They spoke of threats, calculations, and the absolute certainty of a man who believed he controlled everything and everyone around him. And then everything happened very fast. They moved through the back alley, weaving between piles of garbage and flies that buzzed like sentinels guarding the abandoned spaces of the town. The smell of rot and horse manure filled the air, but neither of them paid it any attention. There were more important things to worry about. Suddenly a hand shot out from the shadows and grabbed Elena's arm with brutal force. The grip was crushing, meant to hurt, meant to control. She screamed, "Stop! Let go!" Silas reacted without thinking. He drove his shoulder into the attacker, slamming the man against the adobe wall with enough force to send him crumpling to the ground, gasping for air that would not come. Silas grabbed Elena's hand. "Run!" They sprinted toward the livery stable where the saddles were stored. Their footsteps echoed off the narrow walls of the alley, too loud in the sudden silence that had fallen over this forgotten corner of the town. A woman appeared in a side doorway. She was older, with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much to be fooled by appearances. She stopped, startled, but when she saw Elena's face, bruised and gasping and determined, she did not hesitate. "Inside, now!" No one argued. The door closed behind them, and the bolt slid home with a metallic click that seemed to seal them away from the chaos outside. The noise from the street became muffled, distant, like a storm heard from inside a sturdy house. Elena leaned against the wall, trembling violently. "They were going to take me," she whispered, "right there in the street, in front of everyone." Silas nodded grimly. "Yes, and that means the performance is over. Marcus is done pretending." The woman who had saved them stepped forward into the dim light of the stable. She was perhaps 60 years old, with a face lined by decades of hard living and harder losses. Her name was Martha Brennan, and she had buried 2 husbands and raised 3 sons in this unforgiving territory. She trusted nothing and no one except what she could see with her own eyes. "I saw this girl on the road yesterday," Martha said, her voice rough as sandpaper. "She did not look like someone hunting for trouble. She looked like someone running from it." Elena stared at her eyes wet with unshed tears. "You believe me?" Martha met her gaze without flinching. "I believe what I see, and what I see is a girl who has been hurt, not a thief." Outside, the voices were growing louder, shouts and accusations, rumors dressed up as certainties. Marcus Crane was already telling his story, and the people were listening. Silas looked at Elena, determination burning in his tired eyes. "We have to do this right, or we do not walk out of here at all." She looked at him directly, and something in her expression hardened into steel. "I am not running anymore." That almost drew a half-smile from Silas. The bolt on the stable door rattled. Not hard, not yet, but enough to send a message. "We are still here. We are not going away." Elena pressed her back against the wall, arms crossed over her chest, breathing ragged. Her eyes tracked every sound, every footstep, every whisper of movement outside. Silas stayed close to the door, one hand flat against the wood. He could feel the murmur of the crowd like a vibration growing stronger with each passing moment. He had been in situations like this before, but this time it was different. This was not a duel between men with guns. This was an entire town deciding who to believe. "Do not respond," he murmured to Elena, "no matter what they say." She nodded, her throat burning from holding back words that wanted to escape. Outside, Marcus Crane's voice rose above the noise with a poisonous calm. The same voice that charmed half the church on Sundays. The same voice that convinced good people to look the other way. "She is scared, confused." And that old rancher filled her head with foolish ideas. "He has always been trouble. Ask anyone." Someone laughed. Someone else spat on the ground. Silas closed his eyes for a second. He recognized that tone, the tone of people who had already made up their minds about what was true. And then a new voice cut through the noise, a woman's voice, strong and clear. "That girl did not look confused to me." Complete silence fell over the street. Silas opened his eyes. He knew who it was. Martha Brennan had stepped outside, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed and her chin lifted in defiance. She was hurt. Yes, but not running around looking for trouble. Now, Marcus, what exactly did she supposedly steal that has you so worked up? Marcus interrupted, his voice dripping with false cordiality. Now, Martha, you have always been kind-hearted, but kindness does not replace judgment. But Silas felt the shift. Small, barely perceptible, but real. And Elena felt it too. She moved closer to the door. "That is something," she whispered. "It is something," Silas agreed quietly. The bolt rattled again, harder this time. "Open up," a man shouted from outside. "We just want to talk." Silas snorted with contempt. He moved to the door but did not open it. "Talk does not start with shoving," he called back. There was a pause. Then Marcus's voice, again lower, now colder, more dangerous. "You are making this worse, Silas. For her." Elena flinched. Silas turned and looked her in the eyes. He shook his head. Firm. Certain. "That is what he wants," he said softly. "He wants you to feel guilty for surviving." A cry rose from the back of the square. "The sheriff is coming." And everything stopped. Boots shuffled nervously. The angry murmur cracked into whispers. The voices outside began to lower in volume and intensity. Silas released a breath, not with relief, but in preparation for what came next. Sheriff Thomas Harlan appeared in front of the stable door. He was a tall man with a face worn down by years of hard decisions and harder compromises. The badge on his chest seemed heavier with each passing day. He was 50 years old, and he had seen enough to know that truth was rarely simple and justice was even more complicated. And he did not look at Marcus Crane first. He looked at Silas as if he already had his name filed away in memory alongside a long list of past troubles. "What is going on here?" he asked, his voice rasping like boots on gravel. "And why is Silas Ashford standing in the middle of the commotion?" Again. Marcus responded immediately, his voice smooth and confident. "She ran away. She stole from me, and now he is hiding her. It is that simple, Sheriff." Harlan turned his head toward the door. "Is that you in there, Ashford?" he called out. "It is." "Open up." Silas did not move immediately. He waited a moment, letting the silence stretch. Then he spoke, his voice firm and clear. "For the record, Sheriff, we were on our way to the courthouse." Harlan raised one eyebrow. "That your idea?" "Yes," Silas answered without hesitation. There was a brief silence. Then the door opened. Elena was the first to step out, her head held high despite everything. The crowd fell silent again as they looked at her. She seemed different now, cleaner, calmer, though she still trembled inside where no one could see. The smile on Marcus Crane's face faltered for just a second, and Sheriff Harlan noticed. He looked Elena over from head to toe, taking in the borrowed clothes, the healing bruises visible at her collar, the way she held herself like someone expecting to be struck at any moment. "Where did you come from?" he asked. "And why are you dressed like you got dragged through a thorn bush?" Elena swallowed hard. "Because that is what happened." Harlan narrowed his eyes. "Tell me more." She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze without wavering. "He would not stop putting his hands on me. And when I told him to stop, it did not matter to him." Marcus let out a dry, dismissive laugh. "She is twisting everything, making up stories." But Harlan did not laugh with him. "What papers did she supposedly steal?" he asked Marcus directly. Marcus opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again, 1 second too late. Silas saw it, and so did Harlan. "This needs to be taken to the proper authorities," the sheriff said, his voice flat and official. "To the courthouse." That word cut through the crowd like a knife. Inside the courthouse, the air was cooler, quieter. The dust and prejudice seemed to stay outside, at least for now. Harlan sat down behind the desk. Marcus paced back and forth, his impatience barely concealed. Elena stood beside Silas, her fingers trembling, but she did not take a single step backward. The sheriff looked at her with serious eyes. "Why did you run?" She took a breath. "Because he would not stop." Marcus let out a harsh laugh. "There it is, pure fantasy." But Harlan did not laugh. "Where are the papers?" he asked Marcus. The smile on Marcus's face tightened. Safe, he said with disdain. Silas stepped forward. Sheriff, he is not here because of some missing papers. He is here to drag her back before she has a chance to speak. Harlan frowned. Do you have evidence? Silas nodded once. Not enough to stand alone, but enough to tell you where to look. Ask him about his ledger, and watch his face while you do it. Harlan turned slowly toward Marcus. Do you keep a ledger? Marcus laughed quickly, the sound forced and too bright. It is business matters, nothing more. But Harlan did not laugh with him. Answer the question. Marcus drew himself up straighter, his mask slipping slightly. You do not know what you are talking about. Silas kept his gaze fixed on Harlan. I know enough. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. We will see. He stood up from his seat. I am not making any promises today, he said, but I will promise this. If Marcus Crane is lying, I will find out where he is hiding the truth. Marcus's face darkened like a storm about to break. Elena released the breath she had been holding since they left the road. But Silas did not relax, not yet, because men like Marcus Crane did not crumble in public. They waited, they calculated, they planned. And as they walked out of the courthouse back into the bright sunlight, Silas noticed the look Marcus gave Elena. It was not a look of fury, it was a promise. And that made one thing absolutely clear. The real fight had not even begun yet. They talked late into the night, going over everything they knew, everything they suspected, everything they feared. By the time the moon was high overhead, they had the beginnings of a plan. Tomorrow they would bring the evidence to Sheriff Harlan. They would demand that he search Marcus's office. They would force the truth into the light. It was not much of a plan, but it was all they had. Around 2 a.m. of their second night together, Elena finally fell asleep in the chair by the fire. Silas covered her with a blanket and took up his position on the porch, shotgun across his knees, eyes on the road. He was still there when the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, and he was still there when he saw the smoke. It rose from the direction of his barn, a thick black column that stained the pale morning sky. For one frozen moment, Silas simply stared at it, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then he was moving. He burst through the door, shouting for Elena, grabbing the shotgun as he ran. She was already awake, already on her feet, her eyes wide with fear. "The barn," Silas said. "Stay here. Lock the door." He did not wait for her answer. He was already running across the yard toward the flames that were consuming everything he had built. The horses were screaming. That was the worst part. The sound of animals in terror, trapped and burning. Silas reached the barn door and wrenched it open, plunging into the smoke and heat. He found his bay mare, first untied her and drove her out into the open air, then the mule stubborn even in the face of death. Then the second horse, and the third. By the time he got them all out, the barn was fully engulfed. The roof collapsed inward with a roar, sending sparks spiraling into the dawn sky. Silas stood there, chest heaving, face blackened with soot, and watched 12 years of work turn to ashes. Behind him, he heard Elena's voice. "Silas." He turned. She was standing at the edge of the yard, the paper still clutched against her chest. "He did this," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "Because we went to the sheriff." "Yes." Elena looked at the burning remains of the barn, then back at Silas. "I am sorry," she whispered. "This is my fault. All of this." Silas shook his head slowly. "No, this is his fault, and he is going to answer for it." He walked toward her, his face grim and set. "The paper. Is it safe?" She nodded. "Then nothing is lost that matters." He looked back at the fire, then at the road that led to Red Hollow. "We go to Harlan. Today. Now. Before Marcus has time to plan his next move." Elena straightened her shoulders. "Together." Silas nodded once. "Together." They saddled the surviving horses and rode toward town as the sun climbed higher into the sky. Behind them, the smoke continued to rise, a black pillar marking everything that Marcus Crane had taken from them. But they were still alive, still standing, still fighting. And they were carrying something that Marcus Crane feared more than fire. They were carrying the truth. The ride to Red Hollow seemed longer this time, weighted down by smoke and exhaustion, and the knowledge of what was waiting for them. Elena rode beside Silas, her jaw set, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. When they reached the edge of town, Silas reined his horse to a stop. He looked at Elena, studying her face. "Are you ready for this?" She met his gaze without flinching. "I have been ready since the day I ran." They rode into Red Hollow together, side by side, past the same faces that had watched them yesterday, past the same whispers and the same suspicious eyes. But something was different now. Word had spread about the fire, about the barn that had burned in the night, about the rancher who had lost everything because he chose to protect a stranger. Some of the faces that watched them now held something other than suspicion, something that looked almost like respect. They found Sheriff Harlan outside his office talking with Deputy Cole Winters. Both men turned as Silas and Elena approached. Harlan took in their appearance with a single glance: the soot-stained clothes, the exhausted faces, the determination that burned in both their eyes. "I heard about your barn," he said. "Then you know why we are here." Harlan nodded slowly. "I have been doing some asking around," he said. "Talked to a few people who remember Samuel Whitfield, talked to some folks who have been watching Marcus Crane a little more closely than he knows." He paused. "I think it is time we had a look at that ledger." Silas felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief, not yet, but something close. "When? Now?" Harlan turned to his deputy. "Winters, get the horses. We are riding out to the Crane place." As they prepared to leave, a new figure appeared at the edge of the street. A woman walking alone, her head bowed, a shawl pulled tight around her shoulders despite the heat. Elena saw her first. "Ruth," she breathed. Her sister looked up. Her face was pale and drawn, and there was a fresh bruise darkening her cheekbone. But her eyes, when they met Elena's, held something that had not been there before. Fear, and something else. Determination. "I know where the ledger is," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have always known. I was too afraid to say anything." Elena reached out and took her sister's hand. "It is not too late," she said softly. Ruth looked at the sheriff, then at Silas, then back at her sister. "He hid it under the third floorboard from the window in his office," she said. "I watched him check it every night. I knew it was something bad. I could not." Her voice broke. Elena pulled her close and held her tight. "You are here now," she whispered. "That is what matters." Harlan cleared his throat. "Then I think we have everything we need." He swung up onto his horse and looked down at the small group gathered before him. "Let us go find out what Marcus Crane has been hiding." They rode out together, the sheriff, his deputy, Silas and Elena, and Ruth, who had finally found the courage to tell the truth. Behind them the town of Red Hollow watched in silence, and ahead of them Marcus Crane waited, not knowing that everything he had built on lies was about to come crashing down. The confrontation was coming, the truth was coming, and there would be no more hiding from either one. The ride to the Crane property took less than an hour, but it felt like a lifetime. The sun climbed higher with each passing mile, baking the earth and sending waves of heat shimmering across the horizon. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say that actions would not say better. Sheriff Thomas Harlan rode at the front of the group, his face set in the grim expression of a man who had finally decided to do what needed doing. Deputy Cole Winters flanked him on the right, one hand resting on the pistol at his hip. Behind them came Silas and Elena, riding side by side, their horses close enough that their stirrups nearly touched. And at the back alone, and trembling, rode Ruth Whitmore. She had not stopped shaking since they left Red Hollow. Her hands gripped the reins so tight her knuckles had gone white, and her eyes kept darting to the road ahead, as if she expected Marcus to materialize from the dust at any moment. Elena had tried to convince her to stay behind, to wait in town where it was safe, but Ruth had refused. "I have been hiding for 3 years," she said, her voice cracking. "I am done hiding." So she rode with them toward the house that had been her prison, toward the man who had made her life a waking nightmare, toward the end of everything. The Crane property came into view around mid-morning. It was one of the largest spreads in the territory, a testament to Marcus's wealth and influence. The main house was 2 stories of whitewashed wood with a wide porch and windows that gleamed in the sunlight. Behind it stood a massive barn, several outbuildings and corrals that held dozens of horses. It looked prosperous, respectable, the home of a successful businessman and pillar of the community. It looked like a lie. Harlan raised his hand, and the group stopped at the edge of the property. He studied the house for a long moment, then turned to address the others. "Winters and I will approach the house. The rest of you stay here until I signal." Silas shook his head. "I am coming with you." "This is law business, Ashford. That man burned my barn, threatened my life, hurt people I care about." Silas's voice was calm but unyielding. "I am coming with you." Harlan studied him for a moment, then nodded once. "Fine, but you follow my lead. No heroics." They dismounted and approached the house on foot, moving slowly and carefully. The front door was closed, the windows shuttered despite the heat. The whole place had an air of abandonment, as if everyone inside had already fled. But they had not fled. Silas could feel it in his bones. Marcus was here, waiting. Harlan climbed the porch steps and knocked on the door. The sound echoed across the empty yard. "Marcus Crane, this is Sheriff Harlan. I have a warrant to search the premises. Open the door." Silence. Harlan knocked again, harder this time. "Crane, I know you are in there. Open up, or I will open it myself." More silence. Then slowly the door swung inward. Marcus Crane stood in the doorway, dressed in his finest clothes, as if he were preparing to attend church. His hair was slicked back, his boots polished to a mirror shine. He looked every inch the respectable businessman. But his eyes told a different story. They were wild, desperate, the eyes of a cornered animal. "Sheriff," he said, his voice smooth despite the tension radiating from every line of his body. "What an unexpected pleasure. What can I do for you?" "We have a warrant to search your office," Harlan replied. "Specifically, we are looking for a ledger, financial records that may be connected to illegal activities." Marcus's smile did not waver, but something shifted behind his eyes. "I am afraid I do not know what you are talking about. All of my business records are perfectly legal. You are welcome to examine them, of course. I have nothing to hide." "Then you will not mind if we take a look?" Marcus stepped aside with an exaggerated gesture of welcome. "Be my guest." They entered the house, Harlan first, then Silas, then Winters. The interior was cool and dark after the brightness outside. Rich furnishings filled every room. Paintings hung on the walls. Crystal chandeliers caught the light from the windows. All of it paid for with blood money, Silas thought. They found the office at the back of the house. It was a large room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive oak desk. Marcus followed them in, still wearing that false smile, still pretending that everything was normal. "The 3rd floorboard from the window," Harlan said. "That is what I was told." He walked to the window and counted the boards. 1, 2, 3. He knelt and pressed down on the edge of the board. It shifted slightly, revealing a narrow gap. Marcus's smile finally cracked. "Wait," he said. "You have no right." But Harlan was already prying up the board. Beneath it was a hollow space, and inside the hollow space was a metal box locked and heavy. "Open it," Harlan said, standing and turning to face Marcus. "I refuse. You have no authority." "I have all the authority I need." Harlan pulled a key from his pocket, a key that Ruth had given him before they left town. A key she had stolen from Marcus's desk drawer months ago and hidden away, waiting for a moment just like this. The lock clicked open. Harlan lifted the lid. Inside was a ledger, thick and worn, filled with page after page of handwritten entries, names, dates, amounts, transactions that spanned years. And scattered among the entries were other documents, bills of sale for horses that had been reported stolen, forged death certificates, letters that implicated half a dozen men in crimes ranging from theft to fraud to murder. Harlan looked through the ledger in silence, his face growing darker with each page he turned. "Samuel Whitfield," he said finally. "There is an entry here dated 2 days before he died, a payment of $500, and next to it 2 words, 'Problem solved.'" He looked up at Marcus. "You want to explain that—" Marcus's mask had fallen away completely now. His face was pale, his hands trembling at his sides. That is not what it looks like. Whitfield was a business partner. The payment was for livestock. There is more," Harlan continued, ignoring him. "Entries for horses that match descriptions of animals stolen from ranches across 3 territories. Payments to men I know to be outlaws and thieves. And here," he turned another page, "a list of names, 6 of them, each one crossed out, each one corresponding to a man who died under suspicious circumstances in the past 5 years. He closed the ledger and looked at Marcus with eyes like flint. "Marcus Crane, you are under arrest for fraud, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder." For a long moment Marcus did not move. He stood there frozen, as if he could not quite believe what was happening, as if the world he had built so carefully was crumbling around him and he was powerless to stop it. Then something in him snapped. He lunged for the desk, reaching for something hidden in the top drawer. A pistol. Silas saw the glint of metal and moved without thinking. He tackled Marcus from the side, driving him away from the desk and onto the floor. They struggled briefly, violently. Marcus was younger and stronger, but Silas had the advantage of experience and desperation. He pinned Marcus's arms and held him down until Winters arrived with handcuffs. "It is over," Silas said, breathing hard. "You are finished." Marcus looked up at him with pure hatred in his eyes. "This is not finished," he snarled. "This will never be finished. You have no idea who you are dealing with. I have friends, powerful friends. They will abandon you," Harlan interrupted, hauling Marcus to his feet. "The moment they see this ledger, they will pretend they never knew you. That is how men like you end up, alone, forgotten, rotting in a cell." He pushed Marcus toward the door. "Take him outside," he told Winters. "Keep him secure. I need to finish going through these documents." Winters led Marcus away, and Silas was left alone with the sheriff in the quiet of the office. Harlan looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You should go tell the women," he said. "They deserve to know it is over." Silas nodded and walked outside into the bright sunlight and the clean air that suddenly seemed fresher than it had in days. Elena was waiting at the edge of the property, still mounted on her horse. Ruth stood beside her, holding the reins of her own mount, her face pale and drawn. When they saw Silas emerge from the house, they both went still, waiting, hoping, afraid to believe. Silas walked toward them slowly, letting them see his face, letting them read the truth in his expression before he spoke. "It is done," he said. "The ledger, the evidence, everything. Harlan has it all." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She dismounted quickly and ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck and holding on as if she would never let go. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you." Silas held her, carefully mindful of all the ways she had been hurt, all the reasons she might flinch from a man's touch. But she did not flinch. She held on tighter. Behind them, Ruth began to cry, quiet, shaking sobs that she tried to muffle with her hands. Elena released Silas and went to her sister, wrapping her arms around her, holding her the way she had wanted to be held for 3 long years. "It is over," Elena said softly. "He cannot hurt us any more." Ruth shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I should have told someone. I should have said something. I knew what he was. I knew what he was doing, and I was so scared." "I know," Elena said. "I know you were. But you are here now. You helped us find the truth. That is what matters." The sisters held each other for a long time, crying and whispering, and finally beginning the slow process of healing that would take months, maybe years, maybe the rest of their lives. Silas watched them from a distance, giving them space, giving them privacy. His chest ached with a strange mixture of grief and gratitude. Grief for all the pain they had endured, gratitude that they had survived it. Harlan emerged from the house carrying the ledger and the metal box. He loaded them onto his horse and then turned to address the group. "I will need statements from all of you," he said, "but that can wait until tomorrow. Right now, I think everyone needs some rest." He mounted his horse and looked down at Silas. "You did good, Ashford. I know we have not always seen eye to eye, but today, you did good." Silas nodded, accepting the praise without comment. "What happens now?" Elena asked, her arm still around her sister's shoulders. "Now, Marcus Crane goes to jail in Tucson to await trial," Harlan replied. "With the evidence in this ledger, he will be convicted of multiple crimes. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "And the two of you are free. Free to go wherever you want, do whatever you want, build whatever kind of life you choose." Elena looked at Ruth, then at Silas, then back at the sheriff. "Thank you," she said, "for believing us." Harlan tipped his hat. "Thank you for having the courage to speak up. That is not an easy thing, especially when the man you are accusing is someone like Marcus Crane." He turned his horse toward the road. "I will be in touch about those statements. Take care of yourselves." And then he was gone, riding toward Red Hollow with the evidence that would finally bring justice to all of Marcus Crane's victims. The days that followed were quiet ones. Silas returned to his ranch to assess the damage from the fire. The barn was a total loss, nothing but charred timbers and ashes. But the horses had survived. The house was intact. And somehow in the midst of all the destruction, a small patch of wildflowers had begun to bloom beside the water trough, life persisting despite everything, finding a way to grow even in the harshest conditions. Elena came to help him rebuild. She arrived the morning after Marcus was taken away, wearing practical clothes and carrying tools she had borrowed from Martha Brennan. "You do not have to do this," Silas told her. "I know," she replied. "I want to." So they worked together side by side, clearing debris and planning the new barn that would rise from the ashes of the old one. They did not talk much. They did not need to. There was a comfort in the silence, a peace in the shared labor that words would only have disrupted. Ruth stayed in town with Martha Brennan, recovering from 3 years of abuse and fear. She was quiet, withdrawn, still flinching at sudden movements and loud noises. But each day she seemed a little stronger, a little more like the sister Elena remembered from before. One evening, about a week after Marcus's arrest, Ruth came to the ranch to visit. She stood at the edge of the property watching Elena and Silas work on the barn foundation, her face uncertain. Elena saw her first. She set down her hammer and walked toward her sister, wiping dust from her hands. "Ruth, I did not expect to see you." "I know. I needed to talk to you, to explain, to apologize." Elena took her sister's hands in her own. "You do not need to apologize." "Yes, I do." Ruth's voice cracked. "I knew what he was doing to you. I knew, and I did nothing. I told myself it was not happening. I told myself you were exaggerating. Because if I admitted the truth, then I would have to admit that my whole life was a lie, that the man I married was a monster, that I had been too weak and too scared to see it." Tears ran down her cheeks. "I am so sorry, Elena. I am so sorry for everything." Elena pulled her sister into a fierce embrace. "You survived," she said. "That is what matters. You survived, and you found the courage to tell the truth when it counted. I do not blame you for being afraid. I was afraid too. We were both trapped in his web." Ruth clung to her, sobbing. "I should have protected you. I was your older sister. I should have—" "Shh." Elena stroked her hair the way their mother used to do when they were children. "We are both free now. That is what matters. We can start over, build new lives, be the people we were always meant to be." Ruth pulled back and looked at her sister with red-rimmed eyes. "How?" she asked. "How do you do it? How do you move forward after something like this?" Elena glanced over her shoulder at Silas, who was still working on the foundation, giving the sisters their privacy. "One day at a time," she said. "One step at a time, and with help from people who care about you." Ruth followed her gaze, and a small tentative smile crossed her face. "He is a good man, is he not?" Elena smiled back. "Yes, he is. Do you love him?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. "I do not know yet," she said finally. "I am still learning what love is supposed to feel like. But I know that when I am with him, I feel safe. I feel respected. I feel like I matter." She paused. "Maybe that is love, or maybe it is just the beginning of it." Ruth squeezed her hand. "I think that is exactly what love is supposed to be." A month passed, then two. The new barn took shape board by board, nail by nail. Silas worked on it every day, and Elena worked beside him. Sometimes Ruth came to help, her hands slowly healing from the delicate work she had once done and the harder work she was learning to do now. The people of Red Hollow watched from a distance. Some of them came to help. Martha Brennan brought food every few days, enough to feed an army. Father Samuel Oakes stopped by to offer blessings and quiet encouragement. Even Deputy Winters showed up one weekend with a wagon load of lumber donated anonymously by someone who had decided that Silas Ashford deserved better than he had received. Slowly, gradually, the wounds began to heal. Marcus Crane was convicted in Tucson on charges of fraud theft and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence in the ledger was overwhelming. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. When the news reached Red Hollow, Elena felt something loosen in her chest, a tightness she had carried for so long that she had forgotten it was there. "It is really over," she said to Silas that evening, sitting on the porch of his cabin watching the sun set over the rebuilt barn. "It is really over," he agreed. She was quiet for a moment, then turned to look at him. "What happens now?" Silas considered the question. He looked out at the land he had worked for 12 years, the land that had taken so much from him and given so little in return. The land that had somehow, despite everything, brought this woman into his life. "I do not know," he said honestly, "but I know I do not want to face it alone anymore." Elena reached out and took his hand. Her fingers intertwined with his strong and sure. "You do not have to." He looked at her. In the fading light, her face was soft, peaceful. The fear that had haunted her eyes for so long was finally beginning to fade, replaced by something warmer, something that looked like hope. "Elena," he said, "when I found you on that road, I did not know what I was getting into. I just knew I could not leave you there. I could not be the man who looked away. And now I know you are the strongest person I have ever met. You survived things that would have broken most people. You found the courage to fight back, to tell the truth, to stand up for yourself when everyone was telling you to stay silent." He lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest over his heart. "I do not know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it, if you want to be." Elena's eyes filled with tears, not tears of sadness this time, tears of something else entirely. "For so long," she said, "I did not think I would ever feel safe again. I did not think I would ever trust anyone again. But you—" She paused, searching for the right words. "You never tried to save me. You just stood beside me and let me save myself. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and gentle, like the first light of dawn, like a promise. When she pulled back, they were both smiling. "So what do we do now?" she asked. Silas looked out at the darkening sky, at the first stars beginning to appear. "We live," he said simply. "We build. We grow. We see what tomorrow brings. Together. Together." And sitting there on that porch with the woman who had become his partner and his friend, and something more, Silas Ashford finally felt something he had not felt in 12 years. Peace. 1 year later, the ranch looked different. Better. The new barn stood strong and proud, larger than the old one had been. The fences had all been mended. A new chicken coop sat beside the house, and a vegetable garden had sprung up where there had once been only dust. Elena lived there now, not as a guest or a refugee, but as a partner in every sense of the word. She had learned to ride properly, to manage cattle, to mend fences and shoe horses, and all the other skills that life on a ranch required. She had also learned to smile again, to laugh, to sleep through the night without waking in terror. Ruth had moved to California, to a town near the ocean where no one knew her name or her history. She sent letters every month, long rambling letters filled with news about her new job at a dress shop and the small house she had rented, and the man she had started courting, a kind widower who treated her like she was precious. Each letter ended the same way. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Martha Brennan had become a regular fixture at the ranch, visiting every Sunday for dinner and gossip, and the kind of companionship that Elena had never known she needed until she had it. Life was good, better than good. Life was something Elena had stopped believing was possible. One evening in late autumn, as the leaves began to turn and the air carried the first hint of winter, Elena and Silas sat on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "I got a letter today," Silas said. Elena looked at him curious. "From the U.S. Marshals in Tucson, about two men they have been tracking for years." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She knew what men he was talking about. The two who had escaped after killing his wife and daughter, the two who had haunted his dreams for 12 years. What did it say? Silas was quiet for a moment, his face unreadable. "They found them, both of them, caught them trying to rob a stagecoach near the border. They are in custody now. They will stand trial for what they did." Elena reached out and took his hand. "How do you feel?" Silas considered the question. For so long he had dreamed of this moment, had imagined what it would feel like to know that the men who killed his family were finally facing justice. He had expected to feel triumph, vindication, closure. Instead, he felt something simpler, something quieter. "I feel tired," he said. "Tired of carrying it, tired of letting it define me." He looked at Elena, and his eyes were clear. "Margaret and Lily are gone. Nothing will bring them back. But holding on to the anger, the need for revenge, it was not helping them. It was only hurting me." He squeezed her hand. "I think it is time to let it go, to finally move forward." Elena leaned against his shoulder, and he put his arm around her. "I think they would want that for you," she said softly. "Margaret and Lily. I think they would want you to be happy." Silas nodded slowly. "I think you are right." They sat there together as the sun sank below the horizon and the stars came out one by one. The same stars that had witnessed everything, the same stars that would be there long after they were gone. "Elena," Silas said after a long silence. "Yes." "Thank you." She looked up at him surprised. "For what?" "For reminding me that it is possible to survive the worst things and still find happiness. For showing me that the heart can heal even when it seems broken beyond repair." He paused. "For giving me a reason to keep going." Elena smiled, and there was no fear in it, no hesitation, just warmth. "You did the same for me," she said. "Every day since you found me on that road." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines that years of hardship had carved there. "I love you, Silas Ashford. I do not know when it happened. Maybe it was gradual building up over all these months. Or maybe it was there from the beginning, from the moment you looked at me and did not see a problem to be solved, but a person to be respected." She kissed him softly. "Whatever the future holds, I want to face it with you." Silas held her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "Then that is what we will do." And as the night settled over the Arizona territory, over the ranch that had been rebuilt from ashes and the lives that had been rebuilt from ruin, a coyote called out in the distance. And another answered, not a warning this time, just a greeting, a reminder that even in the vast and empty darkness, no one was truly alone. Now hear this. Here is the lesson worth carrying with you. Sometimes the bravest act you can do is to say a simple phrase and mean it. Don't touch that. To draw a line. To refuse to let anyone cross it, no matter how much power they have, no matter how loud they shout, no matter how many people believe their lies. And sometimes, love is not about rescuing someone. It is about standing still long enough for that person to find their own strength. It is about being present without demanding, supporting without controlling, trusting someone to save themselves while letting them know they do not have to do it alone. So let me ask you something. Have you ever lived through a moment when the crowd was wrong? When everyone around you believed a lie and only one person had to decide whether to speak up or stay silent? And if that moment came to you, what would you choose to do? If this story meant something to you, take a second to give the video a like. It helps more than you might think. And if you want to keep hearing stories like this, stories about strength and decisions and quiet courage, subscribe to the channel. We tell stories here for people who understand that life does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers. So pour yourself another cup of coffee or tea. Settle in. And before you go, tell me, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? Because somewhere out there, someone else is standing at a crossroads. And it is never too late to choose a better way forward.